On behalf of Merlin's Lab, I'm proud to announce our newest supplement, Merlin's Silver Solution, having anti-parasitic, antibacterial, immune boosting, and anti-inflammatory effects. It aids in cell regeneration, is a powerful antioxidant, and is also pet-friendly. Purify your water and get rid of pesky odors without the harm of chemical fragrances. Visit the site at merlinslab.myshopify.com for more. Check out the site now and get your own 7 ppm Merlin's Lab Silver Solution. Use code JOURNEY2TRUTH for 10% off store-wide. We here at Merlin's Lab thank Journey to Truth for the opportunity to share this message with you. Please enjoy the show.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. As always, a few announcements before we get started. Just a reminder that I will be speaking at the XCon conference in Springfield, Missouri, coming up in a couple weeks, next weekend, I believe, October 30th through November 1st. Tickets are still available if you'd like to come and hang out and join us. It should be a lot of fun. They're going to have a costume party for Halloween. I don't know if I'm dressing up yet or not, but tickets are available at unxnetwork.com. That link is below. And as you guys may know, we have announced our conference. I'm in the process of building a website now, so tickets should be available soon, and we'll be making all those announcements as far as details go very shortly, as soon as all that's ready. But Rebels of Disclosure is the name of the conference, and that's the theme anyway. And the dates are May 13th through 16th in Grafton, Illinois, at the Pierre Marquette Lodge, the same place it's been the last 2 years. And we're really excited to start putting our energy into that and promoting that. And we can't wait to see you guys all there, even though it's way early. So, and one last reminder, don't forget, you can check out our webinars on our Patreon. We just finished our 2-part Hollow Earth series, over almost 6 hours of content, probably, or no, almost 5 hours of content. I'm sorry.
About 5, probably, yeah.
Anyway, it was great. We have some great feedback, and your support means everything to us. It keeps us going. So we appreciate everyone who's signed up and is a loyal Patreon. And the Patreon link is below, and you can check those webinars out there. Tonight, we are joined once again by our friend Daryl James. He's been on the show a number of times by now, and he spoke at our very first Secret Space conference. And Daryl and I have become friends over the years, and we've been talking recently, and he has some really interesting things to say in regards to Israel and things that Robert told him back in, I believe, 2005, and even some new memories surfacing about life on the Japanese world. And I would really want to get into what life was like on the German breakaway civilization, that planet. And we can just go wherever we would like, but we're happy to have you back here, Daryl. Welcome to the show.
All right. Thank you. Good to be here again.
Yeah. So first of all, how you doing?
I'm great.
That's great.
Awesome.
Yeah. Autumn's the best time. Yeah. Fall's the best time in Florida. It's just so hot all the time.
Right.
Oh,
right.
yeah, for sure.
So the other day when we were talking, you had mentioned something about Robert telling you about Israel. It's perfect timing to kind of discuss that and share what he shared with you, just because of what we see happening right now.
Well, I mean, yeah, the biggest thing he said was, he was telling me just about all the different events of the world and all these things that were happening, and different, the geography would change in the sense of like the maps and things like that. Countries, territories would become different. Nations would become different. Like I said, Russia would. He said Russia was going to take back like the Slavic nations, like Ukraine and things like that. And it was just because they wanted to protect the Slavic people. He said it wasn't really like in a sense of they wanted to genocide them or anything like that. It wasn't like World War II with burning the wheat fields, the breadbasket of Europe down in Ukraine. But yeah, he went into like I asked about Israel, all the war that's always happening with the Palestinians and Israel, and he eventually said, "Yeah, Israel will be last." He said that'll be the last thing that will happen. So it seems to me like I don't know, because he was saying things like enjoy the show and stuff like that. So it seems maybe that this a lot of what we don't know happened has already happened, and this whole Israel thing has just this is the end of it. It's because he said that he said Israel will be last in this war in Israel, and yeah, and he also said it wasn't going to be like peaceful and he didn't say we were going to get help from the outside and there weren't going to be other ETs and stuff like that helping us. He said it sounded like it was going to be a lot of war over a long period of time, but it would eventually lead up to something a lot better than what we had in store into our original timeline as far as the timelines being changed. So I mean, yeah, this war is happening, and I don't know. He really didn't go into great detail about it, but he just said Israel will be last, and all these other nations are starting to get in. They're threatening to get in if Israel escalates any further. So I don't know. And he said that like the negative, the Satanists, whatever you want to call them, they were going to like try to start a nuclear war, World War III, things like that. But he said like the positive won't let them, because it's just like it seems like they're in control, but they're not, and they're just letting them do all these things to show us what they had in store for us, like to show us all the carnage that was going to take place if somebody didn't step in and stop us.
Right. So just
Right.
for maybe a new listener, can you just let the audience know who Robert is and why he was even sharing this stuff with you? I know the loyal fans know, but maybe just kind of briefly run through that.
Yeah, he was the executive officer of my last command. I was stationed in RAF Saint Mawgan. It was called JMF RAF back then, Royal Air Force Base. And yeah, he said he was from the year 2580. He told me he was around 400 years old. That's how many times he'd been age regressed, 17 or 18 times. That he came from an original timeline where everybody looked like Mike Pence, is what he told me. Yeah, black hair. He said everybody had black hair, usually brown, sometimes blue eyes, kind of like that turned up nose, that constant like scowl that Mike Pence has. He had that constant scowl. He said everybody had that kind of scowl. Everybody, all the women look like Mike Pence's like wife and daughters. Even the daughter with blonde hair, you could tell she has that hair where it's jet black, and she dyed it, bleached it blonde. So it has like that orangish kind of color that happens when you try to bleach blonde and jet black hair. Yeah, and he told me this stuff because he was looking down my timeline. In other words, like looking at my future. He told me he was genetically augmented in the womb to have like a very high IQ, to be very psychic, to be very telepathic, things like this. And that, yeah, he was just making sure that I wasn't going to kill myself, is what he said, because he said that most people kill themselves within the first 6 months who have memories of the 20-year and back. So he was pretty much just looking down my timeline to make sure I'd be okay. And then he was telling me things, not only because I took part in a lot of these things he told me to help these things transpire, but he also said that, it was like a way to like let me know this isn't just something you're imagining. This isn't just something, you're not going crazy. Like these memories are real, even though he kind of said like, this isn't you. As I was telling him about the memories I had, and he kept on saying, Daryl, that's not you. Like, you don't understand. That's not you. And he kept on saying that. It was almost like he was talking about like a past life I had or something. And yeah, but he was just basically telling me all this stuff, not only to let me know, but it was just kind of like a reassurance to himself that, I wasn't going to take my own life, and maybe it kind of like a hope. He was trying to give me hope for the future to help me carry on and things like that. So I think that's what he was doing.
Yeah, and you mentioned on the phone to me that he told you because he looked on your timeline and he saw that you weren't going to talk. He knew that you wouldn't open your mouth. Is that accurate?
Yeah, well, I mean, not for a long time. I remember like being in the break room after he told me all this stuff, and I was like leaning against the wall, and I was just like, this guy told me I was like a king for a while in some world. He told me that Michael Jackson's going to kill himself and a couple are actually die of an overdose. I mean, but they actually murdered him in a couple years. It was just the different things he was telling me about, all these events that would transpire in the future. And yeah, he knew, like, he was just able to look at my timeline and tell that I wasn't gonna like say anything while I was stationed at that base, which he said is a good thing. Like, I didn't tell anybody. And even though I was tempted to, of course, but yeah, I remember when I was leaving the office, he said, and it was weird. Maybe he was doing this because he was a higher density being, and he did it on purpose because he was pushed. Or no, actually, the world he came from, the year he said the Earth was already fifth density by the time he came into 2580. So he didn't have to be artificially pushed up into fifth density like I did. But he said, as I was leaving, he said, "You're not going to remember this." And I like stopped and I said, "Yes, I will." And then I walked out of his office, and he yeah, and it was almost like maybe a suggestion he was kind of putting into my mind to kind of almost help me cope with this, because higher density beings, they can kind of see the long game. They're better at like seeing what's going to happen in the future. How even though this may seem cruel in the present, how can we help this individual or these individuals cope with this until the eventual outcome happens? And I think maybe that was like a way for him to help me. And I also remember like something I said to the commanding officer, which was kind of funny, and I don't think I've ever brought it up. So after I saw the XO, I saw the CO, and CO was the guy I called Stick, and because I thought he was a stick in the mud, I called him Stick on their world and on this other world I was on and everything, and we didn't like each other. Everything I did, he just he didn't give me any credit for anything. I remember Robert said it was because he was jealous of me, because he said they didn't accept him the way they accepted you, and that made him jealous of me. But I came in and I was all very, because Robert just told me all this stuff about how I knew this guy and everything like that. And I came in and I handed him my paperwork for my discharge papers. When I first walked in, he looked very like scared, almost like surprised, almost like wondering if I remembered him, because Robert told me that they were he only spoke to me telepathically, and I asked him why, and he said that the Master Chief, who was an off-world German, and the CO, who wasn't, but he just wanted to listen. He said they were listening in. He said that, and he pointed at the phone, and he said the phone's on speakerphone, and they're listening to our conversation. That's why he didn't want to talk out loud to me. And I handed him the paper. He signed everything. And I said, "Thank you, sir." And I just smiled. And I got to the door and I kind of put my head up so I knew my voice would bounce off the door. And I said, "No hard feelings, huh, Stick?" And I turned around and I looked at him. And this had to do something with Aquino, with being tortured by Aquino in the underground caverns. I turned around and I looked at him and I said, "Not so high and mighty now, are you?" And I just like walked away, and I said, "No hard feelings," and I walked away. But yeah, that was something I did to the commanding officer before I left, which is, I don't know, something I never really brought up. I just let him know that I knew what he did to me, and I remembered him.
Right. They're probably not used to that. They're used to people being essentially mind wiped and probably not remember anything.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And but like I said, if the XO hadn't told me these things, I probably would have thought it was all in my head, and it probably would have, like, in the long run, hurt me. And I'm glad, he did tell me these things. And sometimes I do think like maybe I should have got back into the chair, but too late for that.
Right. You mentioned to me one time that just working out at the VA gym in Florida, you overheard other veterans talking about the programs, which I found extremely fascinating.
Yeah, it's actually a guy who lives down the street, in the neighborhood, I don't know, a couple blocks from me. And he looks like Mike Pence. He's got like the pure white hair. He's got black eyebrows. And I don't remember. I was in the gym, and I forget what the guy's rank was, but he just walked up right up to him, and he said, "You're from the future, aren't you?" And this older man with white hair, he said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And he said, "We used to work with you guys." And it was just something very it was just very in your face because I think a lot of these guys they worked in above top secret facilities and things like that, and now that they're out and they're retired and stuff like that, they kind of let their guard down. And there is like I forget how many years it is. I'm not sure if it works with this kind of a high clearance, but I remember when I came back from Iraq, they said, you know, we know you're going to talk about the things you did and you saw, but just make sure you wait at least a year. That way the mission will be changed by the time you actually say something. But there is a kind of a grace period that I think it's like 10 years or something like that, where you can actually start talking about the things you saw and did. I'm not really sure if it applies to this kind of like clearance.
I mean, that's pretty wild in my opinion, to just be in a gym, in a VA gym, and just overhearing a conversation where somebody's like, "Hey, you're from the future, aren't you?" He's like, "Yeah, how'd you know?" Like, but so matter of factly having that conversation near you. I don't even know. Maybe that was intentional, but I found it very interesting. You gonna say something there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, because the last time we had you on, I just remember a lot of I saw some comments that were like not super fond of the idea of that being our future, where everyone looks like Mike Pence and it's this Nazi-ish kind of thing, and I would have to agree with that. So just to be clear, like, that's a future, because there is no such thing as the future that's like an inevitable set in stone thing, correct? Like, there's multiple different trajectories or timelines that you could go on. So I'm assuming that's not really the trajectory now, maybe, that we're headed on, or is that still a possibility?
Well, I asked him, he said that he came back in time to change the timeline because we weren't reaching our true potential. That's what he told me. He said we couldn't go beyond fifth density. And he said that once a world gets like kind of stagnant and doesn't keep evolving, that world will eventually die. And but he said once you get to like ninth density, then you're fine. You can just stay there till until the end, till kingdom come, till Prime Creator calls us all back home, and all of this starts all over again, which might as well be infinity because it's so far into the future. But yeah, once you get to like ninth density, you can just stay there. But he said that they couldn't go beyond fifth because of the breeding programs, and there was just like this, it was crazy amounts of war and nuclear war, and it was just like this, everything the Satanists wanted to accomplish happened, is basically what happened with the Mike Pence kind of timeline.
Yeah, and they had poisoned themselves so much and so much destruction that they were stuck now, basically.
They could not reach like a higher spiritual enlightenment to be able to ascend any further. And and I asked him, I said, well, was your mission successful? And he said, yes. And I said, well, what about your parents? He said, my mom's gone, my dad's gone, my brothers and sisters are gone. And he said, my friends are gone. And I said, well, why are you still here? And he said, I don't know. And he really he didn't know. It was almost kind of like he was in the fold of our timeline or something like that and protected him. But he's still here, even though his mother and father never existed. And and it was just bizarre. And he was like, and it scared him. And I asked about his wife, and he said his wife is from this time. And I said, well, then what will happen to your daughter? And he didn't know. And it really terrified him, it seemed like, to even think about it.
So it seems to me if he comes back to change the timeline, then that's not the timeline that we're going to see manifest. Obviously.
No.
Yeah.
No. And and I asked about alternate timelines too. And he said with what the amount of work they did with Kruger and how they were working with the looking glass technology, he said the timeline that he told me about was going to happen, and that was it. And I like that movie Butterfly Effect had come out like on DVD when I was in England. So, and it was like I never really, I thought about alternate timelines and how you could change your own timeline and things like that, which can happen, I guess, on an individual level. And so I brought that up. I said, well, what about extra, other timelines and things like that? And he said, no, it doesn't work that way. He's like, once you get to a specific niche, you can kind of like tell exactly where you're going with the technology they have and stuff like that. Once you get to like a certain area. But yeah, so the nuclear, Holocaust, all that stuff, none of that's going to happen anymore. And he told me it's going to be a much better future and a much, we're not going to be centuries just being completely just, you know,
Stuck in
horrible.
the
It
mud.
sounded horrible for several hundred years. It's going to be horrible. It sounded like, but it's going to be much better now. He said.
That's great.
Yeah, well, for one, with the nukes, we're not just affecting us; we're affecting other dimensions that have nothing that are peaceful. And then so everything I've seen has pointed to the ETs are here helping us because it's also helping them, because we got our technology advanced so much beyond our spirituality that now we have nuclear bombs that we can not just destroy ourselves and the planet, but and that alone, if we just destroyed the planet, that knocks the whole solar system out of balance, which knocks other things out of balance, and it affects all these other dimensions and all these other civilizations beyond most people's comprehension. So like they're like here to make sure we don't do that. They're not allowing us to set off nukes anymore, and that's why you see UFOs shutting down nukes going back decades. I mean, there's proof of this going back decades, and I don't think it's going to be allowed. But of course, they're not telling the world, hey, we don't have the ability. They're still like making it appear as if that's a possibility, because they want the fear, of course. They for all the manipulative reasons. So the whole thing with Israel and Palestine, they want the fear that there's going to be a nuclear war, because that they want to keep that fear going, right? Because the dark powers that are trying to hold on still want that, but it's not going to be allowed. So it does appear like we're being held in almost like a bubble of like protection, where they're like, all right, we're not going to allow you guys to do anything beyond this, but you're going to still have to go through some shit and work out your stuff, but we're going to contain it to a certain level, because otherwise you're going to affect way too much that
Right.
you guys are like little babies with machine guns, basically, like
Right.
Yeah, and well, they want us to have the fear too. I mean, even the
right.
the positive beings, they want us. He told me it was this has to be ingrained into our DNA memory, is what he said. So it's going to be hard, and they want they want to show you what they had planned for us, and they want people to be like scared, and they want people to be disturbed. They want this because it's something where if this happens now, like he said, we could step in right now, we could fix everything, but it would just happen again in 100 years. Like it would
But
just.
then
We
don't learn the lessons. We
don't learn anything. Yeah,
we have to grow
put into like a state of like fear and shock and something that's really disturbing to us. Then that like it goes into your DNA memory, so that like your children's children will remember this. Your actual DNA has a memory, and it just passes on from generation to generation. And like that's how it works. So it seems mean and cruel and things like that to do that to people, but it's like you have to do it. Like there has to be like a painful kind of birthing period to ascend to the next like level of enlightenment of existence.
Well, and growth always happens under stress. I mean, so another thing Robert mentioned to you that I found really interesting, and I have more questions about, is he told you that space isn't what we think it is. Can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I remember like the first class told me that when I first was taking it, but he didn't really know what he was talking about. What I remember, and this wasn't necessarily Robert, maybe he did tell me this, but it's like space is like a cone, if that makes sense, in the sense that it's big at the bottom and it goes up, in the sense that we're at the bottom of the cone. So like space is huge to us, you know what I mean? And so we're third density. Space is just huge. It's impossible to get from one end of the universe to the other. It just can't happen. You know what I mean? At our kind of enlightenment. And then you have like the fifth density beings, which are like in the middle of the cone. And that's their space and their existence. So they still need things like craft and stuff like that to get from one end of the universe, but they can do it. And, fifth density is kind of like more of a spiritual and more of a technological advancement. And then you have beings that are like ninth density. And he told me that ninth density was the highest that they knew of. That's what he told me. He said even ninth density beings don't know anything higher than ninth. He said there could be. He said he wasn't denying that could exist. But he said as far as we know, there's nothing higher than ninth density. And ninth density beings, pretty much are at the very tip of the cone. So they just have to like walk out their front door and they're on the other side of the universe. So that's like, it's like the higher enlightenment you are, the higher you up on the cone, the smaller space becomes, if that makes sense. Because I remember things like, you know, Arcturians, like the people, the beings with like the deep blue skin, they were like ninth density, and they would like appear on our ships sometimes, just appear, and there was like nothing, nobody could do. Like they were just beyond all the technology and stuff, and nothing could stop them from doing that. But they were peaceful beings, so it really didn't matter.
Right. And you know, there are going to be people in the comments that say, "Oh, he's wrong. There's 12th dimensional beings and blah blah." And because I've seen it all, but like just to reaffirm what Daryl said, like he's not claiming that ninth is the highest. So I already know those comments are going to be coming. So
yeah, he said it's the highest that we know of, is what he told me. He said there could be more. He's like, but we haven't seen it. You know what I mean? And even ninth density beings don't know of anything higher than them, but they don't deny it either. There could be something higher.
Right. And my understanding is that the higher up in density you go, the more experience of oneness you have, because it becomes more obvious and apparent that we're all one and we're all connected to not just each other, but everything, the whole multiverse, right? Because we're all God experiencing itself. Everything is the same energy, just in different manifested forms. So that's why it's really just pure stupidity to hurt something outside of you or someone outside of you, because you're hurting yourself, because there's no separation. In the third density, we just have the illusion of this supposed separation. And so we're in this like very illusory dense state where it appears as if we're separate. It appears as if I can affect you and then it has no consequence to me. And that's why fear can be so rampant here, because you fear what you don't understand or know when you're at this lower level of awareness. So, that's when wars and all the rest of it that we see, and then that just creates, that energy just feeds and creates more of the same. So what you feed into creates more of the same. Well, we're learning the lessons. It's like things are going to keep repeating until you get those lessons. So it's like you keep feeding into the energy of fear, lack, separation, anger, hatred. You're going to keep getting more and more and more of that. So that's what we have to learn, that feeding into that energy does nothing but you get more of that.
Right.
And that's what karma is. Karma is just energy. It's just the natural law of how things work in the universe, because all is one. So what you put out is what you're going to get back. That's just how it's going to work,
Yeah. And he said that, because I remembered like the kids in the underground base, and I really didn't understand his part in it. But I just remember that. I remember him describing what the kids were used for adrenochrome harvesting and how they're tortured and things like that. And I said, you're going to hell for this. And he said, there is no hell. And he said, if there is a hell, Earth is it. He said, Earth is hell. He said, we're being artificially kept in like a lower density. Pretty much there's no other world like us left. There were other ones like us, but they were already freed. Well, we're the only ones that right now that are being kept like in this lower density. Like we're like the last place,
the last bastion of,
right.
the dark
like
forces.
hell, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard that from other sources, actually. It's like Earth is the last bastion of the dark forces that they're trying to still protect. They're trying to hold out as long as possible. So they're just trying to stall, basically. They know the war's they've already lost, but they're just trying to stall and keep this system going as long as possible.
Well, they're
basically
delusional psychopaths. So
right. So that's all they know. That's all they can do, because that's just who these beings are,
So Robert told you to create a social media account so they can monitor you. Is that correct?
Yeah. He said, when I was getting out, he said, make sure you get a Facebook account. And I said, what's Facebook? Because this was like, 2005. And he said, it's like MySpace. He says it's like MySpace in the future. Yeah. And
Facebook had just come out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe it was 2004. Yeah.
2004 is technically when it, yeah.
Yeah. Because I arrived on the command 2003. So this could have been 2004. Maybe it was like coming out in a couple months or something. And he said, he said, make sure you get a Facebook account. And, he said, it's like MySpace. And I said, why? And he said, we want to be able to keep an eye on you. We want to be able to track you to make sure you're all right. So it was like, and he himself said he wanted to be able to, you know, keep track of me to make sure I was okay. Because yeah, so that was my
Right.
Yeah.
Facebook experience.
Well, Facebook is actually a DARPA creation. It was LifeLog, and then they just changed the name to Facebook and released it publicly. So it's actually literally a DARPA.
Right. So I mean, it would
Program.
make sense that why he would say Facebook, because the military
Right.
was already behind it. So shifting gears a little bit, you mentioned that you are slowly starting to have a few memories bleed through from like a Japanese world, and you said that Robert told you that these memories would come through in real time. Could you explain that?
Yeah, he said that you know, there's kind of like two of me. The one up in the program, the me right here talking to you right now. And it's like you know, as this guy up here makes new memories, like I remember the beginning and I remember the end, but as far as like stuff in the middle, I really didn't remember. And he said it's like the me up here makes memories, you know, the me down here will remember those memories. Almost like, you know, it's almost like I wake up and I feel like I have a dream or something like that, but it's like memories. And until, you know, the me up here goes back in time and then gets out of the time loop, it's like I'm in this constant kind of time loop. And then, you know, the me that is still hasn't, you know, hard to explain, signed the papers yet, or you know, is being age regressed while I'm signing the papers, because that's what's like the first time I realized I was on a time loop when I was signing the papers. And the first class petty officer said to me, you know, just sign the damn papers because you're already, you know, back there. And he let me know that I had already come back from the 20-year and back. But yeah, it's like he told me that, you know, you make the memories as they happen in real time. So the one up there makes new memories, and the one down here, this me, remembers those memories. And yeah, I remember, yeah, being on a Japanese world, and it was I remember it was very like Blade Runner, I guess you would say. It was very, what is that called? Like I wouldn't call it steampunk, but it's like cyberpunk kind of thing. But it wasn't like in the sense that it was like everybody had implants and stuff. It was in the sense that advertisements just kind of appeared in front of you and things like that. You would just be like walking, you know, down the sidewalk, and it would just be like you know, like a woman would just appear in front of you and try to sell you something. And it was just like a hologram. And it was a lot of holograms, a lot of 3D holograms, a lot of advertisement, kind of like Fuji, a lot of, you know, neon signs everywhere, the way, you know, Fuji is right now today. And, you know, and I remember like women with small dogs. There were like, it seemed like just about every woman had like a small dog. Either she was holding it or walking the dog. But yeah, like I just remember just, you know, a hologram of like women would just appear right in front of you and start speaking to you in Japanese. And yeah, like that
Wow.
was like, yeah,
So this
it was
is
very,
fairly recent. Like,
yeah, this was like a month ago. Yeah, that I kind of realized that I was, you know, on this Japanese world. And the military looks, they dress very much just like they did in World War II. It's kind of like the way the Germans do. You know, they wear that high collar and stuff like that. They, just like you think of like the Japanese officers of World War II, like in their secret space program, they wear a very similar uniform to what they wore in World War II. And yeah, it was just,
and
yeah, that's what I remember that right now. Yeah.
and
And
I
also I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
he said that I remember Robert told me that you know, the 20 years they gave me a 3-year extension is what he said, because I guess because I was in like the Dark Fleet, which really wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to go directly into Solar Warden, so they kind of like awarded me like an extra 3 years. But then they didn't send me back a year early, because I kept on saying I still have a year. Like, you're not supposed to send me back. I still have a year. Because like I said, I can remember the beginning and the end, but not really. And I remember that at the end, me saying that. And yeah, so hopefully this spring, I mean, this coming up spring, I think is like my end. So I think that's my end, because that would be an extra 2 years
Oh,
after the
so
20.
you're at the end of you're in the extra time, overtime.
Yeah, I'm in like the extension they gave me because of you know, the mishap that happened in the beginning. I guess they felt like they would award me an extra 3 years.
And there's no recollection as to where this Japanese world might reside.
No, that's how my memories are. They're not really like, they're like, situation scenarios, me walking down the street, me having a discussion with someone. As far as actual, I remember the technology, some of it. I remember how the ship worked. I remember the ship was basically just worked with a telepathic bond, so it wasn't really like a lot of, buttons and things like that. You really weren't piloting it in the sense that you were controlling it through, a different kind of like, the way it, the interface was just, it was telepathic. It was just complete. It was like an extension of yourself. It was almost like you became kind of part of the ship. And there was like a very large smart glass pad like on a swing arm, and you would use that for like docking and like departing and things like that. You would use that to when you're docking onto like a space station. They have like space stations outside of worlds because something that big can't land.
So how would you describe the firmament that people say that we can't break through?
Oh, I mean, I would just describe that as just probably the what is that called? The magnetic field.
The magnetosphere?
Yeah, I would probably describe it as that. But I do remember when I first talked to Robert about joining the program, I did ask, I said, is the universe constantly growing at the speed of light, like according to Einstein's theory, of the Big Bang, where it's ever expanding at the speed of light, like for infinity? And he said, no, there's a limit. He said there is like an ending. So maybe that could be what they're talking about as well. The universe itself has like a limit, has an ending. And I asked him how long it would take to get to the end from Earth. And he said with the proper amount of jumps, about 15 minutes. And he said, and then he kind of calculated in his head at the speed of light, approaching the speed of light. That's what they, what they say, approaching the speed of light. I think he said it would take about 8 years. So it's not nearly as big as we think it is. Or maybe it's just the speed of light kind of is different than but I think he said 8 years. I think he only said it would take about 8 years to get to the end from Earth. And there is an ending, and it doesn't grow like, at the speed of light. So maybe that could be what the people are thinking as well. Because I remember, like, I've seen old medieval paintings of like a painting of Christ, and he's holding like a sphere in his hand, like a silver sphere, and they said that represented like the Earth or something. But maybe it represents the universe itself. You know what I mean? That could be it as well. I'm not, I've seen things like that.
Interesting. So something that we've kind of touched on in past interviews, but I'm really fascinated with, and I just felt like it would be fun to discuss it further, was what life was like on the German planet, on the German world, and like how you ended up there, but specifically like some of the details, kind of like the Japanese world, like the hologram popping up in the sidewalk, like those little details I find very intriguing. And I was wondering maybe we can just go into that a little bit and explain to our audience like how you ended up on the German planet and then what that was like.
Well, I mean, on the German world, it was I was getting everything the Germans wanted, and I was doing very well, and they liked that I played an instrument, and I was like their entertainment. They had a bar on the ship where they would drink beer, and eventually I had like a high-ranking German come up to me, and he was like, I don't know, equivalent to like an admiral or a general, and he said, well, it was after one of the reptiles congratulated me. There was like a team of reptiles on the ship. I remember that. It was like the head, the master of the ship, and then there were like 3 others. And he said, you're doing a very good job. I'll tell the reptiles, I'll tell them back, on Earth to be easy on you for the whole, poking the reptile in the eye incident when I first went to a density chamber. And after that, the Germans kind of took me to the side in a different office, and this very high-ranking German, he said, they're lying to you. When you get back, they're just going to tear you apart, and it's going to be horrible. And he said that, your only living relatives are your mother and your sister. And we would like you to go into the Dark Fleet, full time, just not go back to Earth and just stay in the Dark Fleet. And I told him I'd do it, but I told him I wanted German citizenship. Like I wanted everything. I wanted to be able to own land and have a wife and have kids and have them to be citizens. And they talked about it. And next day they came back to me and they said yes, and they agreed. So I got almost like a green card to kind of be on their world. Like It was notarized, like a notarized paper. It was like one from this high-ranking officer and one from like the mayor of this town, and I think it was like New Berlin, I think is what it was called. And yeah, it was very like tropical. It had beaches, palm trees. I met a woman there. Her name was Helen, I think. And yeah, it was just very it looked like just like an old kind of German town. It looked kind of like, I don't know, like Munich or something like that. It was very, the architecture and everything else. The buildings weren't, extremely high. It wasn't, they weren't 4 or 5 stories. It wasn't like something grandiose. They had like markets, almost like a farmer's market. I remember being at like farmer's markets. I remember not being able to speak German very well at all. And but everybody knew how to speak English because it's like they're all kind of taught to be spies, like infiltrators. And so like English is a very common language on Earth. So it's like they could all be tasked to like come to Earth and act as though they're American and things like that, or act as though they're English. So they all speak English very fluently. And the man eventually, the guy at the market started speaking English with me. And this woman, Helen, there was with me there. And these two, like, they were like constables, like German, like police. They came up to me and they said, like, why don't you speak German? And I told them my situation, that I was like, I had like this visa, like kind of a green card kind of thing to be on this world. And they said, what evidence do you have of this? And I pulled it out of my pocket, and it was notarized, and they read it, and they had never seen anything like this before. And they were still questioning me. And this woman, Helen, just started like raising her voice to them in German. And then they just like folded the papers up and like handed them back to me, and that was the end of it. But yeah, it was like even Robert told me that he had never been to the world before, and that they're very secretive. And he was asking me what it was like, and I told him it was like the 40s. I told him that men wore suits and fedoras, and women wear dresses and pillbox hats. There was like a like a public transit kind of system. There was like a tram, and that was mostly like women with children and things like that, one of that, and elderly. And then there was like this kind of sidewalk system where there were like branches that you stepped on that were slower, and they would slowly speed up till you hit the center. And then the center, you were going like, I don't even know, 50 miles an hour. But it was like you were in this tube, so you didn't feel it. You were inside of like a tube. And holograms would appear in front of you and tell you like what street you were on, what destination was coming up, where to exit out. And then there were branches where you would just step off, and you'd kind of like get lunged back a little bit, but it would slowly descend you until you got off at your stop. So it was like this moving sidewalk where it just, boom, you hit the center part and you just took off. Wow. And then once you wanted to step off, you just saw like a hologram appear where you wanted to get off, and you would just step off. And I think they had like a franc system. It was almost like a kind of gold. It looked like their money. Yeah, and I mean, I remember getting a fitted suit, and I remember being sized up for it by like an actual tailor. It wasn't high tech. It almost like, I don't know if you go to like Germany nowadays, it's like, you kind of have to pay to do everything, but they do that so everybody has something to do. Everybody has a job. Everybody gets paid. So even like bathroom attendants at a McDonald's, like there's a bathroom attendant everywhere in Germany. You have to pay to like go to the bathroom everywhere. But they do it for the purpose of giving everybody, a job, something to do, something to be paid for, something to fulfill their life. But it was kind of like that there too. Even though they have technology, I'm sure they could just size you up. There was still a tailor there that, used measuring tape and everything like that to get your suit size. Yeah, I mean, it was the S3 of my command in England, the legal officer, who was like the fourth in command. He was a lieutenant, but he was actually an off-world German too. And he was the first officer on my ship. He was like the number 2 German, ranking German. And I asked him for money, and he gave me 500 francs, I think it was. But it was like, I bought like, I don't even know, 4 suits. I bought a couple suits. I bought like a bathing suit. I bought a towel. I bought all this stuff, and I still had like 300 francs left over, so their money went very far. It was a lot further. So it was like, probably like what the 20s were like or whatever. It was like a
Right.
booming economy.
That's incredible. I mean, that's the type of details that you just can't make up. Like it's
Yeah.
so fascinating to me. And so how did you end up getting off of that planet? What was that process like? What happened? Wasn't there like some dinner or something?
Oh, right, right, yeah. Well, I was with Helen and the guy who was the S3, who was the first officer. Um, he invited me over to their house for dinner, both of us for dinner. For he had, he was married and he had two sons, and even the kids wore like, very old fashioned stuff like knickerbockers with the knee high socks and all that stuff. They wore stuff like that, and they were talking to me and they spoke English very well as well. His two sons, and it was like very old fashioned in the sense that they ate in the kitchen. They had like a kids table in the kitchen, and they had one of those doors. I remember that very well, like the padded vinyl doors, like a restaurant door that swings back and forth when you go in and out of the kitchen with the small glass, window in it,
Right.
circular window. And yeah, and we ate outside, and the kids ate in the kitchen. They had a small like kids table, and they ate in the kitchen. And I remember the wife said something about the reptiles, negative about the reptiles, and said something like, "I can't stand them. I hate them. I can't stand them." And I kind of was just quiet because it was almost like you were in this kind of prison mentality in the sense that you were like almost like in a prison camp where it was like in Korea or something. It was like you felt like they had such control of their life that they were able to step into your mind, you know what I mean, and know what you were thinking. So it was like you never like judged the reptiles. It was very, you never had bad thoughts about them. You tried not to. And he said, it's okay. We don't like them either. You can speak freely. And I just told him, I hate them, because they hate themselves. You can just tell they hated themselves, and that's why they hated everything else. And yeah, so I was just open about how much I hated them after that. But yeah, I thought it was very strange that the off-world Germans just openly didn't like, they despised the reptiles. It seemed like they maybe got into a deal they didn't understand they were getting into, probably whenever they left Earth, is what it sounded like. Like,
Wow.
they
Yeah.
didn't know
So
they were gonna.
eventually they are like,
Yeah, aligning with Draco is a very bad deal, and they probably had no
Right.
idea.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's how they got their world. Because it's like one of those things where, like, if you're loyal to the Draco, then they'll give you things. Like if you prove your loyalty, they'll give you things. So that's probably where they got their worlds from. I think they had more than one, the off-world Germans, but yeah, and they didn't like it. And there was also like there seemed to be a breakaway as well with the Dark Fleet, where the Dark Fleet themselves maybe be with Kruger or something like that, because I know Kruger is like a Germany from an alternate Earth. There's like I think they told me there was 8 different universes that we know of, and they have the technology to be able to go into different universes, which we don't have that technology here. Because how I remember it is it's almost the same thing with the other universes where the Germans use the Vril Society, the women with the very long hair that could channel and things like that. They channel. They get positive ETs. The positive ETs offer them karmic weapons, is what they call them, which is like say Berlin's getting bombed, it would send the bombs right back up and blow the plane up. So it would immediately stop the war. It would be a suicide mission for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But the Germans from like our world, they didn't think that was enough, so they denied them. So then negative ETs came, like Greys and the reptiles, and they offered them like offensive weapons. And the whole point of World War II wasn't to be won by the Germans. They were just trying to delay as long as they could to get all this technology. They not only got from, the Draco and, where they were told to dig in Antarctica and things like that, and get it to South America as quickly as possible. That's what I believe World War II was actually about, just to hold the Allies off long enough just to get everything there. And
Sounds about right.
but yeah, but this Kruger world, they immediately went with the positive ETs. They took this technology and they worked with, like, the positive ETs, Pleiadians and things like that, and they developed a technology that was able to go into different universes. And we don't no being that we know of in this universe has that technology. The reptiles don't, Pleiadians, nobody that we know of has that technology. Kruger has it, and with these other ETs they work with. And they're trying to get all of these universes that they know of on the same page. They're trying to help everybody out, get them all to their fullest potential to eventually fight the AI. And the AI is like, they have this technology too, as far as we know, and they're going into different universes and corrupting these universes. And that's what, like, the Draco use. They're filled with the AI, and it's in a different universe, so we can't fight it. So it's really like it's impossible for us to fight, but they can't do it on their own. So they're trying to get all these other universes together on the same page to just go after the AI all at once. And that's as far as, like, I can tell what's happening with that and what Kruger is. And so there is, I remember talking to the lieutenant, the doctor on the base. And, I was doing, like, my final physical before I checked out of the military, and I saw him, and he was an off-world German. And he started talking to me, like, telepathically immediately. And I said something like, I was mad. I didn't really know what was happening. And I just knew I hated the reptiles. And I remember I called to the Germans and stuff. I called the reptiles their gods whenever I got into, like, with the Pleiadians and stuff like that. And he said, it may seem like there are gods. And I said, no, they're your gods. He's like, you don't understand. And then he said, like, we're helping you. Like, I hope you know that. Like, we're trying, like, we're helping you. We're helping Earth now, is what he's told me. So it almost seemed like that there was, like, either he was part of Kruger, then I didn't realize it, or he was part of the Dark Fleet from our universe. And it seemed like there was, like, a breakaway, like a rebellion against the Dracos and the Dark Fleet itself.
Wow. That's so incredible. This information, I can listen to it all day. Just sitting here, like, hearing what's just these firsthand stories. I just absolutely love it. So whenever you were going back to getting off the German planet, like, you eventually, like, while you were there, that was when you were technically part of Dark Fleet. And then weren't you, like, saved from that situation?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't really see it that way. That's like something complex about how it kind of works is, I was kind of like I was like a nominee, I guess, a select, like a Dark Fleet select, I guess you would say. I wasn't officially part of them yet, but I was kind of like selected to become one of them. This was something that really didn't happen a lot, so it was kind of new. So I was still kind of like in a probationary period is what I was with them. And I had their uniform. I wore the uniform they wore, and I was part of them. And it was just eventually we got to the first officer came up to me and he said, we're going to see the ones that we've been fighting, and we're going to see them, and they're not going to attack the master, which is like the head reptile. He said, but just make sure, just in case, protect the master, at all costs. And I said, yes, sir. And we got to this space station area, and it was very, like, I really didn't know anything else existed except for maybe, like, grays and reptiles and things like that. And yeah, when we got into, like, the space station area, it was like a United Nations kind of thing almost, where different ETs and things like that would talk about, I don't know, peace treaties or negotiations. Trade was big there. ETs are big on trade. And I saw it all. I saw, the Lyrans and the cat beings and the canine beings, and most of it was small. A lot of the things you saw were very small, and like maybe only a foot tall. And it was almost like an unspoken rule where, like, the taller beings like us kind of walked very slowly, so these smaller things can kind of weave in and out of their legs, and they were just running around everywhere and looking around. Most of the stuff wore, like, robes. Most of it wore robes. Most of the beings you saw wore robes. And yeah, it was eventually like a man and a woman, Nordics. And I remember Robert told me they were called Tijetans, but yeah, they were Nordics. And they came up and the master came up, and we were just standing there, and it was like, the commanding officer, the executive officer of Dark Fleet, and myself, and I was somehow involved in this, and I didn't know what was happening. And they were speaking to each other. First, it was the woman. It's kind of like how negotiations happens. First, the woman comes up, and she kind of like, compliments them and things like that. And it was something to the effect of, the property belongs to us, and it does. And you took this property from us, and you broke the contract. And the reptiles argument was, we've invested so much time and resources into the property, it rightfully belongs to us now. And then the man came up with like a smart glass pad, and he showed him like the exact contract. And he said, like, if you don't return the property, this will be considered an act of war. And the reptile read like every line, put his hands behind his back, and read every line on the smart glass pad. And then he just kind of threw his hands up and just walked away. And the commanding officer ran right behind him, and the executive officer was still standing with me. And the woman came up to me, and she said, "You're coming with us now." And I looked at him, and he nodded his head. And I looked at her, and I said, "Can I get my things?" She said, "Yes, hurry." And I grabbed my things. But yeah, that's how it was. It was like I was still property. I was still like a slave. You know what I mean? Even with the positive beings. And that's something that's weird that people, I don't know, maybe wouldn't like, but even positive beings, deal with that. They deal in that. They deal in the slave trade. They deal in things like that. They deal in trade. You know what I mean? I had no say so. I had no rights still. So I had to go with them. Even though I was engaged in everything else, trying to start a new life, I had to start all over again.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that just goes back to my point where nothing is black and white. We like to think of things in simple terms, and sometimes it's very convoluted. And people, like you said, they like the Germans, they get into a bad deal with the reptilians. They don't know what they're getting themselves into. So then, automatically they're the bad guys. Everyone thinks they're negative, and the Nazis and all this stuff. And yeah, there are negative acts, and there are things arguably that can, we can say, yeah, they're not great. But we have to understand that people are getting themselves into situations that they don't really know what they're signing up for. And nothing's black and white. So I think it's interesting when we get to hear stories like this.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into, that's for sure. And I signed the contract. So before when I was still on Earth at the base, I signed to go into and I didn't realize, the things I'd be doing. I just kind of did it.
Right.
I thought I was helping. And I was, I guess, eventually in the end. But in the beginning, it was horrible.
Mm. Did you have anything you want to add to that, Aaron? Or ask?
Not really. Yeah, but so what do you see right now? So bringing it back to the present, like, does it look like we're on a good trajectory right now, as far as you can tell? It's just things are going to be chaotic for a little while before they start visibly getting better.
Well, I just know what you guys know, in the sense that, what is it, General Milley? They finally got rid of that guy. And that guy was a nightmare. And they replaced him with another general, and his middle name is Q, which I think is a funny, like, nod and wink, maybe. Mm-hmm. And it's just, geez, man, the Bidens, isn't Joe Biden, like, being impeached, basically? Like, they're going through a trial and things like that to impeach him. And I don't know, maybe it'll happen, or maybe it won't. But to me, it's very strange that nobody cares. This would be like huge. This would be huge at any other time, right? And nobody cares. You know what I mean? And it's just, to me, right. That's a big sign right there, where it's just all these things are happening right now.
Yeah, it's really in recent years, it's been really apparent to me how just asleep so many people are, how not just brainwashed and programmed, absolutely that, but like just asleep, just like all they can see is what is like their routine in their life right in front of them, and that's it. And like nothing else. They don't even like, it's like things are right in their face and they can't even see it or understand what's really going on.
Yeah, I think that's from a cocktail.
But I think there's what's that?
I was just saying, I think that's from a cocktail of drugs and poisons. I mean, you got the air, the water, the food,
Right.
and eventually you're literally being mind controlled, and
Right.
you get to this frequency where everything's about instant gratification, and people are looking for that, those dopamine hits, and the attention span is shortened. So even when you do present the truth to these people, in 15 seconds they forgot about it because, oh, look, a squirrel,
Right. Like they're talking about governments are now literally coming out and saying, hey, UFOs are real. We found ET bodies. ETs are real. They're here. Like this should be the number one thing on every news, number one thing talked about on the planet. But what is like, most people are just like, oh, cool. Okay, whatever. Let me just go back to my job. And,
well, the news isn't helping either, though. I mean, the news isn't telling anyone anything. This is stuff. The news isn't telling anybody. I mean, it might be like on like a little snippet here and there, but it's
they're part of the cover up. They're part of it too, right? But it's still out there, and it should. That's what I'm saying. It should be on the news more. Like it should be, but like but then most people, even when like I try to talk to the average person about this stuff, their eyes glaze over, and they put up this wall like, oh yeah, that sounds like BS to me. That sounds like fantasy, whatever. It's probably not true because they haven't heard it on the news, because they weren't taught it in school, because their parents didn't teach them. It's like people have this like expectation of like truth is going to just be handed to me on a platter. It's like, that's not the world we live in. And if you can't understand that, you're still super asleep. You haven't even begun.
It's but it's not their fault. We're born.
It's not their fault.
We're born into this mind control.
Right. And everyone's at where they're at, but it's like, it just shows you how long of a way to go so many people have. And it's like, I'm curious how things are going to play out when you still have so many people on the planet that are at that level. Like, do things have to get like really, really bad to like jolt them awake? Or like, I'm just curious, like, how is this going to play out?
I don't think anyone has the answer to that. I mean,
I was actually told that like they thought like Europe and stuff is more on the ball, but like Robert told me, like the United States, this is kind of like, I don't know, maybe demoralizing, but it's going to happen anyways. But they kind of wanted the awakening to happen more in America. It's happening in Europe and the rest of the world, but it's not happening so much in America. So America kind of has to be like kind of pushed through the door, like American people in general. We've just been, brainwashed for so long. And he's like, yeah, like the United States, they're not really, it's not unlocking what they hoped it would unlock in them. So they kind of just have to just shove them through it. While the rest of the world, it's working for them, but for America, it's really not working. But whether we like it or not, this is happening in the sense of like we're gonna go into a more enlightened form of just consciousness. Our consciousness is going to be raised, whether we like it or not.
We're going to get our butts kicked.
Yeah.
If we're not.
do things happen in your life, Daryl, that might be indicators that Robert or somebody else is watching you still, is monitoring you still? Do you ever get indications of that?
I mean, except for the incident where I had with like that grill and things like that, which I talked about in one of the past videos. I mean, that was a big one. I mean, if you want me to go into that more.
I just meant like, are you ever just driving down the street or something, like something will occur in your daily life where like it's like a nod, like them just letting you know that, we're still watching you?
I mean, no. And that's like really maddening for me in that sense, where I wish somebody, I wish that they would. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's for my own protection. Maybe it's for, I don't really know. Maybe I couldn't say, but I'm not a channeler. I don't really talk to them. I'm not. I don't talk to the Pleiadians. I don't really talk to Robert. I mean, when he was looking down my timeline, he said there were instances when I was present with him in the office where he kind of like stopped me. I was trying to talk to him, and he said, "Wait." And I said, "What?" He's like, "You're talking to me right now." So maybe like I am, but I don't really know it. It was almost like he he kind of like, there were times where I was kind of speaking to him where I realized he was there. And sometimes maybe I think I do it, but it's just like, I'm not sure. I mean, I have doubts, you know what I mean? I mean, he did say that, you know, we're behind schedule. As far as when he was looking at my timeline, he thought things were going to happen quicker, but you know, through what he saw through looking glass technology. But when he was in my presence looking through my timeline, he could tell that we're about 2 years behind schedule, is what I think he pretty much told me. And like I said, he said that, you know, the negative beings, they can slow things down, but they can't stop it. Like, it can't be stopped, but it can be prolonged. And I think it's being prolonged. Yeah.
That's all they can do. Yeah.
Right.
But they can only do that so much, and then it's
Yeah. Well, this has been incredibly fascinating. Once again, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us, Daryl, before we start wrapping this up?
No, I mean, but just have hope, you know, have a positive view. I mean, I think positivity is very good. It's always good to have a positive view. You know, where there's life, there's hope. I mean, that's something, you know, like a Roman general once said, or a centurion. So, I mean, never forget that. That's like very important. It's always good to have hope.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thanks again for joining us. And it's always a pleasure to have you on. And I'm sure, you know, one day down the line, we'll be doing this again. And, you know, keep it up. And we appreciate everything you're doing right now. Sharing this stuff is important. It's crucial. And we have to, you know, the secret space program topic in general, they're trying to sweep it under the rug, and we have to keep it alive. You know, they want people to stop talking. So just by you doing these interviews, it's actually, I think it's doing more for the timeline than you might realize. So thank you. And yeah, thank you guys all for tuning in. And don't forget to go check out our webinars. If you haven't, that link is below. And I hope some of you guys might be coming to Springfield and seeing me at the XCon. I'll be speaking there, sharing some of my stories and some new stuff I haven't told yet. So if you're interested, those tickets are below on xnetwork.com. And that being said, have a great evening. We love you all, and good night.
A lot of this information has been kept sort of locked up or kept undercover because of the invasion of the Smithsonian group way back in the 1880s.
What actually happens is it's not taken to preserve it, it's taken to hide it.
And about 4.5 miles from here, a cave was discovered. It's not really a cave as such, it's a man-made cavern system.
But how the hell do you get that much granite? Because the granite on the base of that damn near weighs what the dirt on the top of it weighs. Nobody knows what's underneath it. I've heard a theory that there's a spaceship underneath it.
There was copper and steel plated artifacts that depicted men in armor with shields and helmets.
Including right here at Cahokia, there were reported 2 giants with double rows of teeth and 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Extra vertebrae or extra ribs in their cage. These are different races of people. They're not just regular humans.
Definitely is a stone burial chamber, and there's a large body in it, bones. I would say 15 to 16 feet.
I saw different types of extraterrestrials here with the Native Americans.
The peoples of the Cahokia Mounds actually saw the Birdman as some kind of cosmic being and not a humanoid being.
So this Birdman was the last and the pure and the true of his kind.
So yes, there were rituals, or there were dances and celebrations, and people would dress up like the galactic beings that were visiting. But there were actual physical galactic beings that were visiting.